This is our third April series of Book Sandwich-In program. It's
42, I think.
42 years of local folks coming in and reviewing a book of sorts. This particular series, our committee, myself, Richard Beatty, I'm on the committee. Kathy Hawley is on the committee. Am I talking to? I need to talk up? Okay. I'll project. Got to project. Let's see. Christina Morillero, and we meet in January to pick up the series. Kathy Hawley. Sorry. I'll get Ted Smith's name right. Don't worry. All right. So anyway, our third of the 5 series that are in April. Our guest today is Ted Hawley. Ted Hawley has this wonderful operation on the outskirts of Batavia, right before you go over the thruway. Ted and Patty have created quite a business, and I don't know if anybody knows about New York Craft Malts, but it is an awesome operation, and we certainly appreciate it. I'm going to read the bio, as long as you took the trouble of writing it, I'm going to read it. All right, a local entrepreneur and founder of New York Craft Malt here in Batavia, a 4th-generation farmer, Ted saw a unique opportunity to transform 2 buildings on the property of the Hawley Farms into a modern-day malt house. He has been at the forefront of the craft beer movement in New York State since 2012 and was the first person to open a malt house in New York since Prohibition. Ted prefers dark, malt-forward beers that are well-balanced and brewed in New York State. Ted is going to tell us all about our book today, which is The Comic Book Story of Beer. I read it some years ago, and it is very, very factual, but entertaining at the same time. I was talking to Ted, apparently, or you folks talking about how scientific beer can be a rather dry topic. Ted's going to add some light to it, so welcome.
Thank you, Richard. I'm honored that you would have me here today. Disclaimer, I'm a maltster, not a brewer. If you have any questions about malts, I can probably answer any questions that you need to know on the subject. Probably this talk will be a little malt forward, which I think will be very interesting as well. All beers have malt in it. We'll get into it a little later, but like Richard was saying, there's a lot of books out there regarding, there's hundreds of books on brewing, and many of them are very dry, very scientific, very boring, if you will. You got to really keep on top of it. But this comic book story of beer gives a whole new spin on it. It's actually a great book. It's in layman's terms. It has a lot of character in it, a lot of comic strips, very presentable to the script in it. It has a lot of great facts. I'm not sure many are facts, but there's so much out there. And brewing's been around 7,000 years. Brewing has they found many clay pots back in the day, 6,000 years ago, in China and all over Europe, with DNA of beer in it, made with many different kind of products. So there's really, it's kind of hearsay of what really went on back then in those days, of what happened. It was pretty primitive. What came first, beer or bread? That's debatable. Beer and bread have the same ingredients. It's grains, water, and act of God at the time. Nobody knew why. Beer fermented. Nobody knew. It was all spontaneous fermentation of the bread and or of the beer. So I'm gonna take a breath here. So, but there's a lot of unique factors in archaeology digs and things like that, of remnants of what they brewed. I have a friend in Long Island, jumping ahead a little bit. He's a skin diver. He's a diver. He went in the in the Hudson, where a ship had sunk 100 years ago, found remnants of a bottle, and there was beer in it. He found yeast in there, propagated it, and made a beer out of that yeast that they brewed 100 years ago. So there's a lot of interesting things that are going on. But the beginnings of the book start with a gentleman that has been pretty much drinking all night and got a call in the morning and said a couple of friends have come into town, and they're sophisticated friends, so we better get a sophisticated beer for these guys. So he goes to the, he's a mass production type of group drinker, and he goes in the store, and as you know now, you go to the store and you see on the shelves, what do you pick? I mean, there's hundreds of styles and brewery types and breweries, and where do you start? This guy had no way to start it. He asked the owner of the store, where do I start from this, But, and that's where it kind of kicks off, is kind of where we are and how we got there. So, back in the day, like I said, there was, they had grains. They were growing ancient grains, mostly barley and wheat. What you have to do is, it has to be malted first. And that's where I come in, as a maltster. So all beer needs a grain in it, but you cannot brew beer with just raw grains. So the grains have to be malted first. Anybody know what malt? Everybody knows what malt is? No. Everybody thinks they know what hops is. That's another ingredient. But malt is actually a 3-step process. It's been around 6,000 years or more. They just did it many different ways. You have to steep the grain. You have to bring up the moisture of the grain to get it to grow. It starts chitting. It's called chitting. It starts producing the first rootlet on it. And then it takes about 2 to 3 days to bring the moisture level up. So steeping is the first step, and then you have to germinate it. So you're germinating it by, what I do is I have a modern day system where it's called pneumatic malting. We do it in tanks, stainless steel tanks. It looks like a brewery. But I can keep the environment to where I exactly need it at all times. So during the steeping, then we transfer it to a germination tank. We germinate it. It's like a sprouted grain. Your sprouted grains are much better for digestion, correct? So your sprouted grains are in breads and things like that. But in brewing, we take it the next step further. What we're doing is when the grain grows, starts to grow, the enzymes inside the grain will start breaking down the large protein walls. And it starts eating away, those enzymes start eating away, and it opens up the starches that are inside the grain. And those starches will become sugars later on in the brewing process. But we need to preserve those enzymes that are needed in the starches. So the next step would be kiln drying it. So the last step is kilning it. So when you kiln it, you want to preserve all your enzymes, all the starches, so you have to use a lot of air and a little bit of heat. So there's 3 steps to kilning. The kilning process, it's called a free dry, then a forced dry, and then a curing process. So the free dry period is when you're preserving all your enzymes. And then the next step is the forced dry. You add a little more heat to it, because if you add too much heat to it, it'll kill all the enzymes, and the brewer's going to be complaining. The brewers are always complaining anyway, but it's always my fault. But then the end process is curing, which creates color and flavor at that point. Different temperatures will give you different products at that point. So we're doing that all out on Bay Street Road in Batavia. Like Richard said, we were the first ones in register a malt house post-prohibition, and it was all new to me. I'm self-taught. I spent time up in Canada, up in the Canadian Malting Barley Technical Center for many weeks, and learned the trade there. Designed my own equipment, because at the time there wasn't any craft malting size equipment anywhere. So I designed a lot of it myself, had it built in China, and we brought it over, and it didn't really work in the beginning because anything in China you have to tinker with, right? So that was the case, and right now we're rocking and rolling on making a lot of malt. We are dealing with over 100 breweries at any particular time. My wife Patty, she does all the orders come in, all the logistics, everything goes out in 50-pound bags on skids, and we have forklifts to load up daily, and it goes all over. We sell a third of our product down in New York City. But back to the book. So, beginning times, they had no idea why these beers were fermenting. You know, they were making bread. They put bread in water to ferment, but it wouldn't ferment all the time. So it was really a mystery back in those days. But why? And not only that, up to 1,000 years ago, they didn't know why beer was fermenting. Then get into the book a little bit here. Very primitive times back then, but it was a way to make something that was sanitized. So water at the time, was all tainted by, sanitation means were really bad back in the day. So beer was actually something to drink. It was drunk by children, everybody, 3 meals a day. So it was something they could drink that was sanitized. They were putting all kinds of other products in it, any kind of herbs. They were experimenting constantly of what to put in there and make it taste different. It's quite comical. The book has it. That's why it's a comic book. But it's got a lot of. They were thinking the gods were when they wouldn't ferment for them. They thought they did something bad, and the gods were punishing them. So I mean, it got very religious and very superstitious of why these beers were fermenting and why they weren't. Were they bad people? Were they good people? Something happened. It was very beginning stages of all this. Then kind of jumps right into the brewing process. Just what we'll do is. I already told you about malting, and I'll tell you about different beers coming up that are in the book, what malts went into them. But the brewing process, first you need to grow the grains, of course. We're all about New York craft grains. 99% of our product is grown regionally. I deal with all the farmers here as much as I can for my rye, my wheat, oats, corn. I have specialty grains grown for me, nugget barley, nugget oats. I flake those so I don't have to take the hulls off. But locally grown grains is where it's at, keeping everything local as much as possible. So the process of harvesting, steeping, germinating, kilning, now we have to start the brewing process. So the brewing process, you can put, my grain goes out, my malt grain goes out looking like it came right out of the field, but it's been converted. So inside it is where the extract is, where the starches are. So you have to open that up. If you don't open it up, you're not going to get anything out of it. So it has to be cracked open. So you crack it open, it goes through a mill, a special mill. You don't want to pulverize it because you use the hulls as a filtration system later. So it goes through a mill, and then you make a mash with it. You put it in with water. You stir it up, and you have to bring it up to temperature, a certain temperature, about 74, 75 degrees Celsius, for a period of time. And what it does is it cooks it, kind of, and it brings those starches, it turns those starches into sugars. So now that wort is sweet. You've extracted everything out of that malt into a sugar. So next step is to lauter it, which is a filtration. You keep bringing it back around, and you get as much extract out of that grain as possible. And then the next step would be to boil it. So boiling it is sanitizing. So when you boil, that's where it all came into effect, why beer was good to drink over water is because you're boiling it. So you have to boil that wort. It's a law now, it has to be boiled because of the sanitizing purposes. So then you boil it, bring it up to temperature, then you run it through a heat exchanger to bring the temperature back down. You put it in a fermenter. You have all that fresh wort in that fermenter, and then you have to pitch the yeast. So nowadays we know what yeast is. There's so many different strains of yeast. We'll get into that a little bit further. But you pitch the yeast at that time, and there's many different kind of beers and many different kind of yeast, and it takes different times to ferment. They actually have yeast now that'll ferment the whole batch within 2 days max. So I'm going kind of slow here, so let's speed up. A lot to go over. Let's jump right through some of the mythic stuff there. So most of the beers originally were made were a lambic type product, a sour beer, because it was all spontaneous fermentation. But what it was is they just mixed the grain in the water and just left it out open in a pail, whatever. And it was all about the yeast in the air. That was what made it ferment. So it was just a mystery to them why that one did, that one did not. But you get a lot of bacteria that way too, as well. You know, the air has a lot of bacteria. It depends on where you are, regions and things like that. And it has a kind of a funky flavor to it. And it's called a non-balanced beer. You can balance a beer by adding sugars and things like that to it. But that became, lambic beers, sour beers are a thing nowadays. I don't know if anybody's had them. But most breweries do have at least one sour beer on tap. My taste buds really don't enjoy sour beer. I like more forward beers than most. So, but the lambic beers, I'll go over some criteria. Basically, all beers have a color, a bitterness, and a strength. So the IBU is International Bitterness Units, which is the bitterness of what the hops give the beer. So I think you go into a brewery, you're going to get a list of beers. They're going to give you these samples and they'll tell you how bitter it is. I'm not a hop guy. IPAs are not my thing anymore. Used to be. But that'll tell you how bitter it is from the hops. And then the SRM is a standard reference method, which is the color of the beer. It's also considered, you can use Lovey Bond as well. That can give you the color of the beer, and then ABV is alcohol by volume, how strong that beer is with alcohol. Lambic beers of the day were just basic pale malt, any kind of malt they had. We're not going to get too in depth with that. There's not a lot of interesting things about the malt at the time. Then eventually, beer became getting to be a commodity, and the monks got involved with brewing beer at a large scale because they had the temperament, they had the workforce, they could make the beer, and they were selling it as income for the monastery. So they were one of the first, if you will, mass production breweries type businesses. And they would make a Trappist double at the time, and that's a nice beer. That's a malt forward character beer that has some roasted beer, malt in it, which we have a roaster. We have the largest malt roaster in the Northeast right now. But we take the finished malt, we put it in the roaster, and we have about 30 different kind of roasts that we make. But this would be kind of a, we call it Saranac Special. I don't have it here. But we've trademarked all our names of our products, so we're not competing with all the other names out there. In the beginning, everybody wanted this and that, but it was the name of that other company, and I was trying to make that thing that they were making, but I had to make them used to what I made. So, so that's kind of a Saranac Special. It's the SRM on that is like a 10 to 17 SRM, and this Trappist double had 15 to 24 IBU and 6.5 to 8% ABV, so that was a higher alcohol beer there. Then the government kind of got involved with a product called Groot. Groot was, a mixture of herbs ground up, and they put it in beer, and then they wanted to tax it and start making money on this beer. It became kind of a revenue for governments, but not really governments at the time, but the church and many kings, whatever, at the time. So Brut was the drink of the time. It was beer with just a lot of different herbs in it, things like that, and that it could be taxed. So I took most of my notes out of here. So, but after a while, the technology changed, frame of minds have changed, and they started bringing in some scientific ways of figuring out how to make beer consistently the same. Everything was always different. And at the time, we had glasses on. They were well, the French got involved with a product, and they brought it to its highlight. It's called the Bock beer. Bock beer is a nice beer. Has a lot of bold flavor to it. It's got some dark malts in it. Most Bock beers were that came into play about 1368 AD. The color was a copper to light. Again, to get those colors back then, all the roasting back then was done by fire, of course. So every beer that had a little bit of roast in it was always smoky. So we couldn't get away from that because that's how they tried them all. That's how they roasted it. So Bock beer was a smoky, darker beer. And nowadays they get those red hues by they're called caramels, crystal malts, which I make in my roaster. You put green malt in the roaster. You bring it up to a certain temperature, and you're liquefying the endosperm. You're liquefying the inside of it. You squeeze it, and if it pops like a fester pimple, you get 95 out of 100 kernels. You liquefy the endosperm, and then you start drying it, and that turns into a beautiful caramel, brown sugar type product. And we make a 20, 40, 60, 80, 120, and a very dark. Those are different levels of color. If they just want a nice red beer, then the Crystal 60 will make that beer nice and red and very flavorful. So that's what a Bock beer is. That came about, like I said, 1368 AD. Let's see. So Sam Adams of our country was a maltster and a brewer. He brought in some new methods of brewing beer to the U.S. at the time, and was quite successful at it. But prior to that, before I get into it, there was a plague that was going around that took out at least a third of Europe. And that was from fleas, rats, and flies, distributing all the, and it was said that the beer was doing it, and they were trying to control all that, and the government developed a covered beer stein. So covered beer steins of the day were way back, a couple thousand years ago, but it's kind of continued. But it was to keep the flies out of the beer, so to keep a cover on it. And then porters and stouts came in. That's a much bolder. I have some product here that are in stouts, highly roasted. The roast bring in the color and the bold flavors, and the stouts and porters of the time, 20 to 35 SRM, 20 to 40 IBU, and 4.5 to 6 ABV. We've got imperial stouts nowadays that are up to 10, 9, 10% alcohol, and gotta be careful of after dinner drink type things. But I really enjoy a nice porter. Guinness is on top of the list. And Guinness doesn't come into play yet. Doesn't come into trophy. The 1642 is when a porter and stout came in. In every beer made, you need a base malt. Your base malt gives you, like I said in the beginning, the sugars for the yeast to attack and ferment and make alcohol. So every beer needs an amount of base malt, which is you have your acid pilsner and some Munich there. But every beer needs that base malt. Every beer is measured in barrels of beer. A barrel of beer is 15 gallons. So depending on the size system they have, you need about 75 to 100 pounds of base malt just to feed the yeast. And then everything after that is for flavor, color, and style of beer. So base malt is top of the line. The skid's this full of base malt, then I have a 50-pound bag of this, a 50-pound bag of that, 50 there, and that's for the rest of the recipe they're making. But just wanted to point that out. Then what came into play were IPAs. Not Richard so much, but he knows too much. IPA is an Indian Pale Ale. Does anybody know the story about Indian Pale Ale?
British sailors
Yep.
were, I guess, either going to India or coming from India, and in order to survive, I suppose, they had to process the beer in a way that it wouldn't deteriorate over the long sea voyage.
Right. Exactly correct. What Indian Pale Ale is it's a high volume of hops. The hops is a preservative. That's the only reason why it's used today, is because the government's got involved and you need to put a preservative in these. They used to bring beer down from England down to India, and it would be bad. They'd have to pour it out. It wouldn't make the trip. There's no shelf life at the time on those things. So actually, a lot of hops brings in a lot of preservatives, a lot of oils, and it preserves that beer longer. So that's exactly correct. But the hops are the winners there. I don't like to say that too often. The hops gets all the glory. The maltsters don't. I don't know why.
For India.
So the way it's always
It's a
been.
winner for India.
For India. Winner for India. All right. So, moving along here, a couple gentlemen from the States, but did all the research in England in the beginning of the 18th century, developed a beer called a lager beer. Lager beer is a beer, it's a different method of fermenting. So lager beer is a beer that is made the same way as normal beers. However, it's a different yeast. And at the time when they first started it, it took about a month to 2 months for fermenting. The yeast took so long to chew up that sugar, create alcohol, and it took so long to make that it was a very smooth, nice beer at the end of the day. So there was a couple gentlemen that developed that, and that was in the beginning of the 18th century. And that, to this day, is a fantastic beer in lagers. All your pilsners are considered lagers nowadays, but the yeast strains have, cut the time by a fraction of the time to brew a lager, which that lager yeast didn't really come out till 6-7 years ago. You still had, none of these local craft breweries wanted to brew a lager because it tied up all their fermenters and they're not making money. They didn't want to make a lager beer. I asked one guy, I said, I can't afford it. We got to have more turnover on and make more product. We can't sit on that fermenter that long. So, but in the last 5 years, I think it'd be the lager yeast that now will finish that beer much faster. And now you're finding lagers through most brewers now are making lager beer. And they're making a nice lager in something called a fooder, which is a very large vessel fermenting wood fermenting vessel that is old style, but it's all coming back. But it's got a chiller on it, you know, so they can keep it. It has to be cold for a long period of time too. So they were only making lagers back then where they could keep it cold. It was in the middle of winter. They used to put the beer in caves and things and just leave it in there for a long time. They'd bring ice in there. The monks would do that too. The lagers are nice beers, but it took way too long back in the day. So we're building up. We're coming closer to present time. 1842, Pilsners came into the picture. So things were kind of stale. Everybody was making about the same products, but Joseph Gross started a process in Bavarian lager. They basically threw all their recipes out. They were pissed that they weren't selling. Everybody was out selling their beers, and you know their beer should be God in that section of the world. They threw out all their methods and started from scratch, and they developed a lager yeast. Again, we're talking about the yeast. This is 1842, so they just started playing with yeast strains. November 11th, 1842, they put their first Pilsner on the market. And to this day, Pilsner is the highest selling beer in the world. You know, follow suit was, you know, your Budweiser, your Pabst, your Busch, those are all Pilsners. And to this day, it is the leading variety of beer being produced and purchased. Going along here, and we'll skip ahead a few years. In the beginning of the 19th century, there was a lot of church groups, many of them, and a lot of naysayers regarding beer was not good for people, and a big movement was on. It actually moved into non-beer drinking politicians, and the last step was crime rate was up, so prohibition came into effect. So there's a lot of alcohol related crimes, you know, boards. So prohibition came in effect early in the it started early in the 19th century, but it became a reality January 17th, 1920. So prohibition, there was one particular lady that was, you know, very good comic strips here, that kind of ran the whole show. She had no animal, but mankind will use this rotten slop for others by instinct known it as poison. And she had a big movement there. She was part of it and got the government to go all the way. But it was you know, World War I came in, and then we moved to the Depression. You know, the Depression, it was bad. Everybody was bad. Prior to Prohibition, every metropolitan city had their own malt houses, own breweries. You know, it was 2 or 3 breweries. You know, Batavia had at least 2 breweries. Eli Fish, and Hennessey Brewery had a small brewery here as well. So, but I mean, it was just huge. We have surpassed it now in today's numbers. But once Prohibition hit, and then Roosevelt, shortly after he became president, he said in 1933, newly elected President Franklin Roosevelt proposed to immediate reauthorize the manufacture and sales of beer. What that did was it created 75,000 jobs in breweries and 250,000 jobs in retail and distribution. So that was a kind of a good push to get people working at the time. And it's always been a money, even today, there's just New York State, I don't have the numbers, but millions and millions of dollars these craft malt houses, breweries are bringing in. However, as soon as that was lifted, things were not the same. We lost all those small breweries everywhere. All the small breweries were wiped out. The only guys that could bring it back were the big dogs. You know, we're talking Budweiser, the Bushes, Schlitz, all the big guys, and they started mass producing Pilsners mostly, and the lighter beers, no flavor, no body, no dark beers at the time. However, my first dark beer was probably 1975 with Schlitz dark. Got me involved. I think I was of age at that time. But that got me introduced. What's that?
It was 18 back then.
It was, and I think I was 18. But beers got kind of stagnant for many years. All they were producing, after we won the war, World War II came in, and it was just the big guys were making what was selling, and today it's still selling Pilsners. However, the Pilsners got stale, and there's a gentleman that wanted to make an American lager, which was the start a little bit. Now that was the 1950s. 1950s into the 60s, they started making less alcohol by volume, ABV. Less alcohol in the beers, lighter beers. Again, we're making a very light beer that's drinkable, and everybody was making those because it was a sellable beer, and everybody was forgetting the body and flavors of the darker beers, the Bocks, things like that. And then a gentleman made an American lager beer, which is a spin-off on a Pilsner. You use a lager yeast, and you can put a little bit of color and flavor in there. So it's more of a flavorful lager beer. Again, back in those days, could be up to a month of fermentation, even further, a couple of months. But that was the start of something new that came in the 60s, and then change started. The first change was Fritz Maytag. Fritz Maytag, washers and dryers and things. He went into a pub in California and grabbed a beer, and then somebody mentioned to him that he should invest in the beer industry. And right down the road, there was a brewery going out of business. So that brewery was Anchor Steam Brewery. Anchor Steam Brewery had been around for 100 years or so. It was one of the ones that did come back, but they wasn't going to make it. So he actually bought into Anchor Steam Brewery at the time, and brought in a team of individuals to change the scene of beer. That was the start of things, and at the time he was making, he brought up a Christmas ale, a hoppy ale, a barley wine, and even a porter first brewed in 1972. Just starting to bring the flavors back into beer and people liking it. And the second event that happened right before the explosion of craft beer was somebody made an American Pale Ale. That somebody was Sierra Nevada. Sierra Nevada, he opened up a small little brewery in 1981, and more malt flavor, more character, and got rid of those low ABV beers, a lot of flavor. Individuals, has everything to do with the people of the time, and actually kick-started all these home brewers and making their own beers at home, and those individuals, they all want to be brewers. I would say 90% of the brewers I deal with used to be home brewers. So they all want to be home brewers. They all want to be in business. And these home brewers, I do a lot of supporting of home brewers because they can fail, you know, they're only making 5 gallons. So they're the test kitchen a lot of times for what I make, is making mistakes, yeah. And then they're very influential to the breweries, local breweries, and they become brewers themselves. So that just kicked off the whole revolution of where beer went. It is 500 breweries in New York State now. When I started, New York State had 125. Across the country, maybe 500, maybe. Now New York alone has over 500 breweries. So it's really made a boom, and the consumers are loving it. So we're back to making flavorful beers, colorful beers, beers with backbone. Hops gets all the glory, like I said, but the Belgian wit, you know, we're making beers out of all wheat malts. I make wheat malt, rye malt. I have a full list of malts that we make. We make over 65 products or so. So we're roasting. Not only that, I do now flake. Everybody knows those hazy IPAs, those hazy beers. That comes from flaked oats, flaked wheat. So I now have a flaking system that we steam cook the grain, goes through the flaking mill, dries it, and we're selling a lot of. We're the only ones in New York. We're probably the most diversified malt house in the country right now, being able to malt, roast, and flake. You know, usually everybody's doing one or the other. But I've been listening to these breweries over the past, 13 years. We can only make pails and pilsners. I started with making pails and pilsners. That's all I knew how. And I said, well, we need color, we need flavor. Okay, well, I converted a grill into a drum roaster. I was making 25 pounds at a time, and got me a little bit bigger. And all of a sudden, I had to get bigger. So I bought a 200 kilogram roaster out of China that I helped design and build. I went to Germany and took courses in roasting at Bueller roasting schools. And I helped design it, and they came over, and it's all computerized. They gave me everything I wanted in the computer, and they were here for 2-3 weeks. Didn't speak a bit of English, but they did a really nice job building this roaster for me. I got all the bugs out of the software, and now I'm their North American rep selling roasters. So that got me into the roasting part of it, and the flaking is another design of my own products from Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. Build it all myself. The steam generator, the steam chest, and the mill are all new, but the drying and all the conveyors and things that I need to bring it over to the bagging machine are all used products that I fabricated to fit what I need for that. But all those flakes are in your hazy IPAs, your New England IPAs, and all that. So right now, those damn brewers can't say that they can't get New York grown something. You can make any kind of beer around the world with New York grains right now. So I eliminated them, those naysayers that we just can't make those beers. So I have a lot of great breweries that I work with that are my test kitchen as well. They give me constructive criticism back. My roaster, I was over roasting. It looked great, but there was no extract. I was turning into charcoal inside. It looked great on the outside. So then I ended up having to buy a spectrophotometer to make sure I'm getting all the colors that I need. So we test that on a regular basis to get the colors, because the brewers, their recipe tells, they have their recipe, and if it doesn't come out exactly like that, from alcohol content to the color, you're looking at me. Even though there's so much that can go wrong in the brew house, that they look to me for a lot of information, and actually working with a few of them, a lot of times it's not my fault. This one brewery said, well, this beer was supposed to be a Pilsner, it came out dark. And I checked everything we make, have batch numbers, and we have a report on that. I look back at those reports, and who else did I sell that product to? They weren't having problems. So we got back to it and said, let's look at other things, where this came from. And come to find out, they failed to clean out the auger from the beer before, and there was a little bit of darker grain in that auger system that went in there. So working together, you know, we both need to know. You know, the brewer needs to know, or I need to know if we're having issues at the malt house. So it's good to get brewers that have common sense and will work with you, which there's a lot out there that have a problem in the beginning stage that we don't want to do that again. So they're only buying German malts and things. So. But there is a farm brewing license that requires farm brewers to use 60% New York ingredients. That actually has been quite good for me and growing. And at one time there was 14 different malt houses that popped up in New York State because they thought it was easy, and we're down to 3. So I'm the largest in New York State right now. We put out about 500 ton of product between everything that we make. We sell a lot to distillers. We make distiller products. We custom mill for millers. We have a hammer mill to make powder. 4 roller mills, 2 roller mills. We custom mill for anybody that needs it. So brewers just want it cracked open so we don't run it through the hammer mill. But the hammer mill, the new systems for distilling, they want powder. So you can get more extract out of it if you can turn it into powder. So Hartman Distilling, that's all our grains up there. Eli Fish, is all our grains are in there. I can keep going on. You know, these are some beers here. I do a lot of business down in Brooklyn. They've been very, very open down there to my products, and I have a lot of great friends down there that I wouldn't have had before. I can go down there. I hate to go to New York. You know, and I can go down there and doors open up for me anywhere I go. You know, breweries wise. It's been very rewarding to be part of this.
Questions? Any questions?
What's the difference between the Irish Guinness beer and the United States beer?
Well, Guinness it's all about the recipe, but a Guinness is a stout. So a stout uses very dark roasted malt. I don't know what the recipe is, it's a top secret thing. But you can make stouts, and in the US, everybody tries to mimic the Guinness. Some are coming close, but most of them are marginal. But you can make a stout with roasted grains in the US. Yeah.
Going back a few years, maybe more than a few years, I remember hearing about this place here on Bank Street, and heard through the grapevine, or maybe I should say the hop vine, that he was growing hops. So was that true? Did you start out growing hops, or has it been malt?
Never hops. That's where I go.
I just want to have
Even today, people will say, "How's the hops going?" Hops is just to put things into perspective. We're going to make some tomato sauce here. Okay? The main ingredient in tomato sauce is what? Tomatoes. And then the oregano goes in, which is a fraction. That's exactly the levels of malt and hops. So the base of everything is all about the malt. The hops comes in later to tickle your nose, and you know it gets all the glory. But I never even entertained growing hops.
Okay.
I know wines of the same grape have different terroirs, and you can have French Chardonnay and American Chardonnay. Is beer the same as their terroir to the grains?
Pretty good question. And that's been poked around quite a bit over the years. There's some grains in the New York State has so many microclimates. It's even the same varieties of barley or wheat, same varieties grown down in Hudson Valley, up in our neck of the woods, or up in the North Territories, they come out different. Whether that goes and transfers to the beer by the end of the day, there's very few that say it does, but I can't tell you myself. But
Are your sources kind of static? Do you get your sources continually from the same place?
My sources, I could talk forever on malt and grains. I have a bunch of growers, and I have a lot of growers that come to me every year. And it's all about the analytics of the grain before I buy it. It all has to be analyzed at Harvard College to give me a spreadsheet of every aspect of what kind of malt quality that grain is. So I buy grains from Hudson Valley, Finger Lakes, all over, wherever I can find the best grain, because I cannot make wheat malt out of marginal grains or marginal barley. Did I answer your question? Yes?
So we asked you to read a graphic novel. This one's a little bit more comic-y in style. What was your experience with that? How did you like that? Is it different from what you normally read?
I enjoyed it a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes it interesting. It makes it, like I said earlier, non-dry. It gives it a spin on, you know, they're really trying to make it into, you know, a fun book to read, where no pictures and just all chemistry and, you know, my Bible's about that big. You guys wouldn't want to look at that at all. And it's all about science of malt. And if there's some pictures in there, that'd be cool. No pictures. Yes.
How many staff do you have working with you?
I have 2 full-time workers. I have a gentleman that's my maltster and the roaster, and then I have another gentleman that he does the cleaning of all the grains, he does all the bagging, and he puts all the orders together. Patty works in the office, brings all the orders in, and arranges all the freight, shipping, which is a nightmare, logistics is a total nightmare. And I try to keep everything running. I buy the grains. I buy, I'm the maintenance guy. And I keep everything running.